Hello everybody, my name is Michele and I am a licensed massage therapist from Washington State, and I bring you MBLEx study resources both here on YouTube. I make as many videos as I can and get that information out to you because that's how I learned best when I was studying for the MBLEx. And then also I have tons of resources on my website. I have free study guides, free practice tests. I have lots of free courses for you to help you to prepare for the massage and bodywork licensing exam with calm and confidence. And today we're going to be talking about the nervous system. We're going to be kicking off this section of this anatomy and physiology series that I've been working on. I'm creating a course on my website, and I'm putting these videos up as soon as I have them ready so that you guys can have early access to it. But we just finished, 2 weeks ago we did the skeletal system. Last week we did the skeletal muscular system. And now we're tying it all together with the nervous system. So this is a big one this week, a lot of information to absorb, and then it's gonna get a lot easier as we go through finishing up this anatomy and physiology series. But let's just go ahead and dive in as soon as we can. I just wanna make sure that you guys know that you can get those free resources. And I also want you to know that there is so much more to know about the nervous system if you're going into any other kind of medical field. But as massage therapists and body workers, there's just a certain amount that we need to know. We need to know just enough to be able to implement our techniques safely, effectively, okay? So that's what I'm presenting you to today. Some people are like, why do we need to know all this stupid stuff? Well, it's because, all we're doing is rubbing on people's bodies. We don't need to know all that. Actually, the work that we do really impacts the nervous system dramatically. And what people need from us is often created by issues in the nervous system. So that's why we need to know this fundamental foundation of understanding of how the nervous system works. So that's why you're gonna get tested on it for the MBLEx. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're gonna be talking about the functions of the nervous system, very important. Nervous system divisions, nervous system tissue, types of neurons and neuroglia, and the anatomy of a nerve. And at the very end, we're going to be talking about MBLEx practice questions. So if all of that seems like stuff that you need to go deeper on, then go ahead and stick around through the whole video. All right, and also I want to make sure that you know that on my website, you can have access to the PDF of the slideshows of this and all the other videos that I've been working on so far. I'm posting them as soon as I have them created. It's in the PDF form. All you have to do is follow the link that's going to be in the description below, and also in the pinned comment, the first pinned comment of this video. So just follow that and it will take you to this PDF slideshow. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So kicking off with a little statement. The nervous system is the body's master communication network, a symphony of electrical and chemical signals that coordinates every thought, movement, and sensation. It interprets the world around us and regulates the body's inner environment, connecting the brain and body back to brain in a seamless flow of information. Every breath, reflex, and emotion arises from this intricate system of neurons supporting cells working in perfect harmony. So why is it important for body workers and massage therapists to understand all of this information about the nervous system? Because it helps you understand how touch and pressure are perceived and processed through sensory neurons, guides your awareness of reflex responses, muscle tone, and involuntary reactions during treatment. It informs safe adaptations for clients with neurological conditions such as neuropathy, stroke, or multiple sclerosis. It deepens understanding of parasympathetic activation and how massage promotes relaxation and healing. It connects anatomy and intuition, allowing you to work with the nervous system and not just the muscles. Another thing for you guys to know is that I have a whole series on pathology, and one of those videos is neurological pathologies. So make sure and check out that video, because in this series for anatomy and physiology, I am not going to be going over pathologies, not significantly anyway. And that is really important information for you to know for the MBLEx, because it's all about treatment for people with neurological issues. Okay, here we go. So 3 functions for the nervous system. The nervous system processes sensory information. It collects information from all around us, inside of the body and outside of the body. It monitors all that stuff, temperature, touch, blood pressure, all of it. And it takes that information and processes it with its integrative functions. So processing, perceiving, analyzing, responding. So not only do we have our cognitive integrations, we also have the reflexive, involuntary integrations as well that are happening that we're not noticing. Our heart keeps beating somehow, thank you very much, nervous system. And then stimulating motor functions, making our bodies do things, and also maintaining homeostasis. So information goes in and information or commands go back out. So we're going to be talking deeper about the different divisions of the central nervous system. We've got the central nervous system and we've got the peripheral nervous system. All of the rest of the videos that I'm going to be producing and putting out through this week have to do with some aspect of either the central nervous system or the peripheral nervous system. So right now I'm just going to go over what each of those things are so that you understand the structure of each of those and what they do, their function. So the function of the central nervous system, CNS for short, whenever you see CNS, you know that means central nervous system. That's where all of the integration happens. Receiving and interpreting all the sensory information and all of the emotional information, all the stuff. And then it directs out those motor responses. So the structures included in the central nervous system are the brain, which is, I forgot to add in the stem and the diencephalon, but I can add that later. So we've got the cerebellum, the cerebrum, and like I said, the brain stem and the diencephalon. We have the spinal cord, which also includes the cauda equina, which is the very, very end of the spinal cord. And then the meninges, which is the packaging that keeps that central nervous system safe, it cushions it from shock and nourishes it. And then the other division of the central nervous system is the peripheral nervous system, and that's where all the sensing and all the stuff happens. So PNS is short for peripheral nervous system. So whenever you say PNS, that means peripheral nervous system. So it carries out all those functions. Brings the information from your fingertips into your central nervous system. It brings all the information from your stomach it brings all the information from your eyes into the central nervous system so that we can figure out what to do with all of that. So that includes 12 pairs of cranial nerves. So there's some nerves that come out of the base of your skull and run in around your throat, around the back of your head, and a couple of little squiggles all the way down into your diaphragm. And then we have the spinal nerves. There's 31 pairs sticking out between every vertebrae. And at the ends of those nerves, we have sensory receptors. General sensory receptors for all the everyday stuff, all the things that happen internally and on the surface of our bodies. And then we have special receptors, which are basically your vision, hearing, smelling, tasting. Okay, so now moving on, now that we did a brief outline of the functions and structure generally of the nervous system, we're going to go deeper and we're going to talk about the tissue, which are two building blocks, neurons and neuroglia. The neurons are the ones that conduct the electrical impulses. That's where the information happens, down the neuron, okay? And then we have neuroglia, which is most of the nervous tissue. It's the supporting network, the glue. Glia is Latin for glue. So that will help you to remember glia, sometimes it's called glia or glial cells, and the proper term is neuroglia, which supports the neurons. And then some accessory organs, axon terminals, that's the length of the nerve. The synaptic bulb, which is the tips of the neuron, and neurotransmitters are the chemicals that are released out of the ends to make stuff happen. Okay, So now we're going to talk about the structure of a neuron. So it's a cell. This whole thing is a cell. Even if it goes the whole length of your, for example, the sciatic nerve, which is a really, really long one, that's all one cell, okay? It's just very, very, very skinny. So it has all the other organelles that any other cell has. It's got the mitochondria, the nucleus, the rough endoplasmic reticulum, all that stuff. The difference is that it's got these little sticky outies that pick up information on the top, and those are called dendrites. It brings in the information from other neurons or from those sensory receptors and brings it into the cell. And that's where the information gets processed. And then the axon is the long strand that carries the information from the cell down to the synaptic bulb to make neurotransmitters come out. It's time to do something. Send that information back or send that information down to make something happen. So that there's this little spot right here on the connection between the axon strand itself and the cell body, and that's called the axon hillock. And that's where the trigger happens to send the information down that axon. So that's going to be important in future videos. And then, the nerve fibers are the dendrites and the axon. And then there's the cell bodies. So whenever you hear nerve fibers being referred to, it's everything except the cell body itself. Now, the impulse always goes one way: dendrite, cell, axon, down to the synapse, okay? So, pew, it always goes that way, pew, all right? So you know. Okay, so how the neurons work. We have 3 different kinds of neurons. There's neurons for sensing things and bringing the information up. Those are called afferent, afferent, excuse me, afferent with an A. So it's the trigger that starts the process. We have motor neurons that carry the information, the command from the central nervous system, either in the brain or the spinal cord, out to all the parts of the body. So to the muscles, the glands, to the organs. I still have morning, my throat gets going. So forgive my cracky voice. Those are called, motor neurons are also referred to as efferent neurons, afferent and efferent. So is referring to the effect of something after it happens, okay? So afferent, always remember that. Whenever I'm like trying to figure out when I'm writing something, I'm like, what's an affect and what's an effect? It's so frustrating to figure out which one is which. So effect, I'm thinking of something I want to change and something I have changed, all right? I hope that helps at all. Efferent are always motor, afferent are always sensory. And then there's the interneurons, which hang out mostly in the spinal column in the brain. And those are the ones that mediate between the sensory and the motor neurons. They process directly between one cell sometimes, and sometimes they're in clusters, which can process together multiple parts of information to do some complex processing. So 3 different neuron shapes, just so you know. Maybe won't be tested on this, but it's just something to know, a little tidbit to put back in the recesses of your mind, just in case you get a weird question on the MBLEx. So most sensory neurons are unipolar, which means that there's like information coming off of them. Let's pretend there's some dendrites on this image, and the information comes in, the information goes out back toward the central nervous system. So that's pretty easy. And then for bipolar the bipolar shape where it's got two like axons sticking out in both directions. Those are typically for specific sensory pathways. Nothing you really need to concern yourself about. And then multipolar are typically either interneurons or motor neurons. And so they can handle a little bit more complex processing. So they get the information and they send it out and they say, go do your job. Okay, so now we're moving on to, we closed out neurons and the neuron types, and now we're going to be talking about neuroglia, the glue, everything else, the whole network that holds everything together, the dark matter that holds the universe that is your nervous system. And those are these 6 different types of cells. The most numerous and the biggest would be the astrocytes. And so I've got some little, see they're like stars, stars, Asteraceae, which is a little bit of information, like all of your sunflowers and things like that. Those are all named after stars, right? So they structurally support the neurons. So you see in this image, we've got these little sticky outies that are just kind of holding everything together. So they hold, this is a neuron, this is a neuron. Cell body, dendrites, axon, synaptic bulbs, okay? And so here is an astrocyte holding all those pieces. And then we've got, and also it forms scar tissue after an injury in the nervous system, and astrocytes create a chemical environment that's good for nerve conduction. And then oligodendrites are only found in the central nervous system, and they create and maintain myelin lipids that's something I forgot to mention in the last section, to insulate the neuron axons. I'm going to go back a second. All these things, boop, 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 those little dots, that's a lipid sheath called myelin that protects, there's no myelin in that image. Anyway, they protect the axon and insulate it and help with nerve conduction, and I'm going to explain that in a couple of videos up. But it helps nerve conduction happen faster because it's an insulator. That's why often there's insulation that we wrap around our electrical wires, is to help everything run smoothly so we don't lose the conduction out the sides. And then we have microglia, which are the phagocytes. They're the immune cells of the nervous system. They absorb and eat up all the stuff that we don't want in there. Okay, so Schwann cells are the myelin creators for the peripheral nervous system. So this is an important thing to remember. Schwann cells are for the peripheral nervous system, and oligodendrites are for the central nervous system, for creating that lipid protective coating. So let's see, what else does a Schwann cell? Protective sheath around an axon helps with nervous tissue regeneration in the peripheral nervous system. Now, satellite cells are special cells that kind of create a collection that we call ganglia, and that's something that's going to be important as we go through the rest of this series. A ganglion, or ganglia, which is multiple, is like a switchboard where all the wires come in, a fuse box essentially, where it's like a dividing thing. A splitter. Back in the day, we used to have landlines back in the 80s and 90s, and if we wanted to have multiple telephones, we wanted a different telephone in each room, we had to use this special little splitter to split off that wire into the different rooms. Woo! That's going way back. I think a lot of you will remember this. So that's what ganglia are. They're like these like knobby blobs where the nervous system comes together, and it's all insulated by the satellite cells and protected, and that the synapses happen inside of that to send the information outward. Okay. And then ependymal cells, which is the 6th type of brain neuroglia, which is, it's different from all the others. It's only inside of the meninges of the brain, and it's kind of like epithelial tissue where it secretes a fluid that creates the cushion that protects your central nervous system. All right, so now we're just going to briefly talk about nerve anatomy, and we're going to be done with this information for now. So the nerves function like a highway, and there are different tracks inside of a nerve. So like each of these blobs, each of these dots is a tube running up a nerve, right? So we've got a motor tract where the information is going down and out. We've got a sensory tract where information is going back in. And we've got blood vessels that help nourish everything. And then there's adipose tissue insulating everything, like lipids, as I was mentioning, protecting everything. And so there's a sheath around each layer, and we're going to be talking about that in just a second. But I just want you to get an idea that it's like a big bundle of wires that are coming together and coming apart depending on their purpose. Everything coming down from the central nervous system is that's the motor or the efferent neurons. It's going to split and split and split as it goes away from the central nervous system. Everything coming in, all the sensory information is coming together into this nerve. All right, I think that's pretty simple. Okay, so there's connective tissue layers. That's our plastic coating, the connective tissue layers around each of these bundles. All right, so these italic names that I have written here are the connective tissue bundles. And then the regular fonts are the structures. So we have the nerve, the main nerve. That's the thing that's coming out of between your vertebrae, coming away from the spinal cord. The coating around that is called the epineurium. And then each big bundle inside of that nerve, whether that be sensory or whether that be motor, is called a fascicle, okay? And its coating is called the perineurium. And then each individual axon inside of the fascicle, it has a myelin sheath around it, ideally. And then around that is a connective tissue layer called the endoneurium. Now we can remember this from our skeletal muscle structure, that the bundles get smaller and smaller and smaller in the muscle tissue fibers, starting with epimysium, wrapping around the fascicle would be the fascicle in a muscle would be the perimysium, and wrapping around each muscle fiber would be an endomysium. But in this case, we're doing neurium because N-E-U-R stands for the nervous system, nervous tissue. Epi means like epic, going around everything, bringing everything together. Peri is also, it's like a smaller going around something, and endo means inside. Make sure to check out in the free resources, there's a little ebook that I created about medical terminology that will give you an idea about how to put these words together, and that will go a long way toward helping you differentiate all this terminology when you're taking the MBLEx. All right, so now it's time to do some MBLEx-style questions because we have gotten through all the information that we need to know for this section. Cafe. Okay. First question. Which of the following best describes the three main functions of the nervous system? Let's go ahead and read through all of our choices. Best describes three main functions of the nervous system. Let's remember back, what were those functions? Our choices are A, circulation, respiration, and digestion. B, sensory input, integration, and motor output. C, perception, contraction, and secretion. D, stimulation, relaxation, and adaptation. Okay, so if I look at all of these choices, circulation, respiration, and digestion are actually like three other systems that we're going to be going over after this. Circulatory system, respiratory system, digestive system. So it can't be that one. Sensory, integrating, and motor. That sounds pretty familiar, right? Perception, contraction, and secretion. These are all things that, well, perception happens, That's part of the integration. Secretion happens as part of the glial cell. One of the glial cells, the impenetrable cells, secrete something. Contraction has nothing to do with, except that motor output will trigger contraction, but that's not the best answer. And then stimulation, relaxation, and adaptation, all of those things happen as a result of the integration and motor output and sensory input of the nervous system. But the actual functions that we have, the simplest way to say it, sensory goes in, it gets integrated, motor output goes out. So that would be B. The nervous system has three primary functions: sensory input, which is detecting internal and external changes; integration, which is processing and interpreting that information; and motor output, which is activating muscles or glands to respond. These functions work together to maintain the body's homeostasis and coordination. Whoop, whoop. All right. Next question. Which statement best describes the anatomy and function of a neuron? Remember, we had two different nervous tissues. We had neuron and neuroglia, and let's remember back what each of those do and what they look like. Anatomy and function. So that's the structure, what composes a neuron, and what it does. Okay. So A, the cell body only stores neurotransmitter for release at the axon terminal. B, the dendrites send impulses away from the cell body and the axon receives incoming signals. Sends impulses away from the cell body and the axon receives incoming signals. C, the axon carries nerve impulses away from the cell body while dendrites receive incoming information from other neurons. D, the axon terminals contain the nucleus and control center of the neuron. So let's pick these guys apart. The cell body only stores neurotransmitters. No, the neurotransmitters live at the synapses, at the very tips of the axons coming away from the cell body. B, the dendrites send impulses away from the cell body. No, the dendrites send impulses to the cell body. And the axon does receive incoming signals and sends them back up, but that's not fully true. It's not the best description. So C, the axon carries nerve impulses away from the cell body. True. Dendrites receive incoming information from other neurons, and then finishing it up, it gives the information to the cell body. And then D, the axon terminals contain the nucleus and control center of the neuron. They do not contain the nucleus. The nucleus lives in the cell body. So C would be the best answer. And the explanation is a neuron's dendrites receive signals from other cells. The cell body processes that information, and the axon carries the electrical impulse away to communicate with other neurons, muscles, or glands. This structure allows for precise, one-directional transmission of nerve impulses throughout the body. Next question. Which of the following correctly pairs a type of neuroglial cell with its primary function? So remember, we had 6 types of neuroglia. The glia are the ones that glue the neurons into place so that we can have our nervous system the way that it is. So the type out of 6 types with its function. So we're going to match it up. So that means there's going to be 3, which are the following correctly pairs. There's going to be 3 incorrect answers and 1 correct answer. So let's pick through which ones are which. All right, astrocytes. Those are the big stars, right? They form myelin in the peripheral nervous system. Is that correct? B, oligodendrites form myelin sheaths around the neuron in the central nervous system. Okay. C, Schwann cells provide immune defense within the brain and spinal cord. Okay. And then D, microglia circulate cerebrospinal fluid around the brain and spinal cord. Let's go through and remember what each of these glial cells do so we can figure out which ones are wrong. Astrocytes. Astrocytes are the big ones, and they kind of They form the scaffolding. They are the structure of the whole nervous system. They hold everything in place. Okay, let's see, what else do they do? Oh, they create a chemical environment that's conducive to the action potential for the nervous synapses. So this is not right. They do not form myelin. Oligodendrites form myelin sheaths around the neurons in the central nervous system is true. That is what they do. Only in the central nervous system though. Schwann cells create the myelin sheaths around the axons in the peripheral nervous system, but they do not provide immune defense anywhere. And then the microglia are the immune cells. They're the phagocytes. They do not circulate cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, so the correct answer would be B, oligodendrites making myelin sheaths only in the central nervous system. So oligodendrites are glial cells in the central nervous system that produce myelin sheaths, which insulate the axons and speed up electrical conduction. In contrast, Schwann cells perform the same function in the peripheral nervous system. Astrocytes support and maintain the blood-brain barrier. I don't know about that part. And microglia act as immune cells that remove debris and pathogens. All true. Okay. Last question. Which of the following correctly lists the connective tissue layers surrounding a peripheral nerve from the outermost to the innermost? So we're going to find the correct list. There's only going to be one correct answer. Now let's remember how it goes from biggest to smallest, outermost to innermost. Remember, we're going to go epi to peri to endo, endo being in the center. Epi always means on the outside, the biggest thing. Endo is the smallest thing, okay? So let's look at this list from outermost to innermost. Which of these four, endoneurium, epineurium, perineurium, or epineurium, epi is in B and D. So we're going to eliminate A and C immediately. So let's read through B. B is epineurium, perineurium, endoneurium. So that's biggest to medium to smallest. B would be correct. And then we'll just compare that real quick to epineurium to endoneurium, and that's not correct. Perineurium being the smallest, which is not true. So B would be the correct answer. A nerve is composed of axons, fascicles of axons, protected by 3 layers of connective tissue. The epineurium surrounds the entire nerve, the perineurium encloses each fascicle, and the endoneurium wraps around each individual axon. These layers protect the nerve fibers and provide pathways for blood vessels and nutrient exchange. All right, so that's it for us today. Make sure to get your printout of this and all of the other slideshows. It's just one file. It's completely up to date. Every time I create a video, I add a set of slideshows. So go ahead and grab that so that you can refer back to all of this information for your studies. And make sure and subscribe if you haven't already so that you can be in the loop for the rest of these nervous system videos. And with that, I will see you in the next one. I think we're going to be talking about the structure and function of the central nervous system. See you there. Toodaloo.